I never thought I'd be writing about this. If you told me a year ago that my life would be flipped upside down by my own family, I would have laughed. But here I am. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how my half-sister Leah shattered my world with one lie that changed everything. Growing up, I was always the sensible one, the older sister who took care of things and made sure everyone was okay. But Leah? She was the center of attention. From the moment she was born, she had everyone wrapped around her finger. My dad, my stepmom, Margaret, they adored her, and Leah knew exactly how to use that to her advantage. Manipulative and charming, she could twist anyone's perception of reality. Things weren't always bad, though. We weren't close, but I tried to be a good sister. My dad remarried when I was 10, and soon after, Leah was born. It was like having a new little toy that everyone doted on. I didn't mind at first, but soon Leah began making little comments about me. Subtle things, like Emma's been acting weird lately, or I'm really worried about her. These little seeds of doubt were planted in my dad and Margaret's minds, without me even realizing it. At 24, I was living on my own, trying to figure out what I wanted out of life. I'd just finished college and was in that phase of finding myself, you know? I was still figuring it out, and sure, I made mistakes, but nothing that deserved what was coming. Leah's whispers had turned into something bigger, though. One day, I got a call from my dad. His voice sounded strange, almost worried. "Emma, we need to talk. Can you come over?" I didn't know it then, but that would be the day my entire life would change. I drove over, a knot forming in my stomach. Something didn't feel right. When I walked in, I saw Margaret sitting stiffly on the couch, arms crossed. She looked like she had already made up her mind about me. And then there was Leah, looking too innocent for someone who just set my life on fire. "Emma," my dad started, "Leah says something about you, and we need to know the truth. Are you on drugs?" I was stunned. "Drugs? Me?" I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "What? No? Of course not. Where is this coming from?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. Leah, with her wide-eyed fake concern, piped in. "I didn't want to say anything, but I've been really worried about you. You've been acting so strange lately." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "I'm fine." Leah then dropped the bomb, looking like she was about to cry. "I found some pills in Emma's room last weekend. I didn't want to say anything, but I've been really scared for you." I stared at her, my mind racing. Leah had never been in my room when I stayed over. I never left anything suspicious there. "That's not true!" I shouted, but Leah just stared at me with her wide eyes. "I'm just trying to help you, Emma," she said sweetly. My heart sank. I had never done drugs in my life. But no matter what I said, my dad and Margaret were already questioning me. They believed Leah. They believed her over me. That wasn't all. Leah also said, "You've been involved with some questionable people," Margaret added, her tone cold. My chest tightened. "What? Where did you hear that?" "Leah is lying." But they weren't listening. The seeds Leah had planted had already taken root. My dad looked at me, his face soft, but there was doubt in his eyes. "Emma, we just want to help. We need to know if you're okay." I couldn't believe it. My own family, the people who were supposed to have my back, were turning against me. "I'm not in trouble," I yelled, my voice cracking. "Leah is lying to you." But it didn't matter. They were already caught in her web. Margaret stood up then. "Until you can be honest with us, we can't trust you. We love you, but we need to take a step back." Take a step back? That was their way of saying they didn't want me around anymore. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My own family was kicking me out, all because of Leah's lies. I left their house that day, feeling numb. The person I thought I knew as my family didn't exist anymore. And Leah? She thrived on the attention. Every time I tried to confront her, she'd twist the story, making me look like the unstable one. As the weeks passed, the rumors started. Leah told people I was a drug addict. She told everyone that I was involved in questionable activities. My job disappeared. Friends stopped calling. I was isolated, with nothing but the lies Leah had spread. But Leah wasn't done yet. She kept going. And the worst part? I couldn't stop it. I could only watch as everything I'd worked for crumbled around me. And then, when I thought things couldn't get worse, my dad called again. "Emma," he said, his voice barely audible, "until you get help, it's best if you stay away. We can't have you around Leah." I was done. That was it. I packed up my things, left the town I'd known, and moved to a new city, hoping to start fresh. But the damage had already been done. My relationship with my family was destroyed, and I had no idea how or if it could ever be repaired. In that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just a victim in this situation. Leah's jealousy, her manipulation, it had destroyed everything I cared about. And as much as I wanted to scream, to make her pay for what she'd done, I knew the real question was, how could I rebuild my life after everything had fallen apart? The first few months after leaving everything behind felt like walking through a fog. I moved into a small apartment with a friend, Jessica. She was kind enough to let me crash on her couch while I tried to figure out what to do next. I didn't have much, just my clothes and the shattered pieces of my dignity, but nothing could make me feel more isolated than the phone calls that never came, the messages that were never sent. I thought, at some point, my family might reach out to me, apologize for what had happened, but I was wrong. Not even my dad, not even Margaret. It was like I'd never existed. My world had become a ghost town. I'd expected it in some way. After all, Leah was the golden child. She could do no wrong, and I was the screw-up, the one who'd been too much of a disappointment for anyone to care. I knew what kind of hold she had on them, how she could twist everything to make me look like the bad guy. But it still hurt, more than I wanted to admit. There were days when I woke up in the middle of the night, heart racing, thinking about how things could have been different, how I could have been enough. But the longer I stayed away from them, the more I realized the truth. They were never going to believe me. They were never going to see what Leah had done. They weren't going to see her for what she truly was: a liar, a manipulator, a person who destroyed lives for the sake of her own attention. It wasn't until I moved to a new city, tried to get a fresh start, that I began to see just how deep the damage ran. The rumors Leah spread didn't just stay in our town. They followed me. I applied for jobs, only to be turned down because someone had heard things. I didn't even know who was spreading the lies anymore. Was it Leah? Was it people who'd believed her? I couldn't tell, but I knew it was happening. I tried to push through. I did. I picked up small jobs, working as a waitress or in retail. But it wasn't enough. The constant feeling of being judged, of being someone else's story, weighed on me like a lead blanket. In the middle of all this chaos, I tried calling my mom. She lived across the country, and though we weren't particularly close, I thought she might be able to offer some comfort. But all she said when I told her what happened was, "I just don't understand how things got so out of hand." I was beyond the point of needing her to understand. I needed her to take my side. But she didn't. She stayed neutral. A part of me understood why she didn't want to get involved in the mess Leah had created, but it stung. It stung like salt in an open wound. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. I found myself sinking into a deeper hole. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I knew, everything I'd built, had been ripped away by someone who was still out there, smiling and playing the innocent victim. Leah didn't just take my family away from me. She took my job, my reputation, my sense of self-worth. And every time I tried to fight back, every time I tried to tell someone the truth, I was met with doubt, disbelief, and silence. But Leah wasn't done, not by a long shot. One day, out of nowhere, I got a call from Dad. The number on my phone made my heart skip a beat. I hadn't heard from him in so long. Maybe this was it. Maybe he was finally ready to believe me. I picked up the phone, my breath shallow. "Dad?" "Emma," he said, his voice almost shaking. "We need to talk. It's about Leah." "Leah? Again?" I almost felt sick. What more could she possibly say? What else could she do to destroy my life? "Please," my dad continued, "just listen to me. Leah's been through a lot. She's asking for you. She says she wants to make things right." I blinked, the words barely registering. Leah? Make things right? After everything she'd done? I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. Make things right? How? By lying some more? By destroying what's left of me? I could hear my dad sigh heavily on the other end. "Emma, I know things haven't been easy for you, but you have to understand Leah's been through a lot. We can't keep ignoring her. We just want to help her." Help her? Leah didn't need help. She needed consequences. She needed to face what she'd done and own up to it. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the words came out shaky, almost pleading. Dad, she's the reason everything fell apart. She's the reason I don't have a job, don't have my family, don't have anything. And you're still making excuses for her? I know, honey, he said, his voice filled with sorrow, but Leah's my daughter too. I can't just abandon her. She's asking for help. She's been to some dark places. We can't just turn our backs on her. Turn our backs on her? I spat, my anger flaring up again. You turned your back on me, Dad. You and Margaret both did. You believed her over me. And now you want me to forgive her? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the hesitation in my dad's voice when he spoke again. I'm sorry, Emma. I really am. But I need you to understand. This is hard for us too. Hard? The anger was almost unbearable now. How could they not see it? How could they not see that I had been telling the truth from the start? That Leah had built a web of lies that had cost me everything? I didn't know how much more of this I could take. How much more of this could I endure before I completely lost myself? The worst part? I wasn't even sure I cared anymore. I hung up the phone before he could say anything else, feeling like I was suffocating. The call wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't anything I had hoped for. It was just another reminder that my family was lost to me. That Leah had won. She'd broken me, and now she was breaking them too. I stared at my phone for a long time after hanging up, the screen glowing in the dark of my apartment. What was I supposed to do now? I had nothing left. I had nothing except the person I was trying so desperately to rebuild. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I avoided thinking about my dad and Leah, but it was impossible. They kept haunting me, like shadows in the corners of my mind, always there, always reminding me of what I had lost. I kept working at the local cafe. It was something to get by, but even that felt like a reminder of everything I had once been and everything I'd lost. I knew I had to let go. I had to stop clinging to something that wasn't coming back. The idea of reconciliation was a fantasy, one I couldn't afford to believe in anymore. I would never get my family back. But the truth was, I had something far more valuable now, my independence, my freedom. I was going to rebuild my life piece by piece. And if my family, my broken, twisted family couldn't see that, then it was their loss, not mine. Because I was done being a victim. And when I looked in the mirror, for the first time in a long time, I saw someone who wasn't just surviving. I was living. And that meant more to me than anything Leah or my family could ever take away. Months passed, but the scars from the past didn't fade. I thought moving to a new city would help me forget, but it didn't. The loneliness still crept in, especially at night when the world quieted down. I still couldn't shake the anger, the sense of betrayal that haunted me like a shadow. No matter how much I tried to fill the silence, the pain never quite went away. There were days when I felt like I had it together. I woke up, went to work, made coffee, and did my best to live. I kept my head down. I even made some new friends, people who didn't know my story. For a while, I thought that might be enough. Maybe I could live a life that wasn't defined by Leah's lies. Maybe I could pretend it didn't matter that my family had abandoned me. But deep down, I knew I couldn't pretend forever. The lies Leah had spread about me had changed the way people saw me, and I couldn't erase that. No matter how hard I tried to be someone new, the weight of my past followed me. There were moments when I'd see someone look at me with judgment in their eyes, like they knew something about me. I didn't want them to. It wasn't just the rumors. It wasn't just losing my job or my family. It was the fact that Leah had taken everything from me, and she was still getting away with it. The worst part was knowing that even now, she was thriving. She was the golden child, the one who always had people's attention. She could say whatever she wanted and get away with it. Meanwhile, I was still cleaning up the mess she'd made, still fighting to reclaim my life, piece by piece. One evening, after a long day at the cafe, I found myself sitting at the small kitchen table of my apartment. The fluorescent light buzzed softly above me, casting shadows over the room. I was tired. So tired of pretending I didn't care. Tired of putting on a mask every day and pretending that the girl who used to have everything, my family, my job, my reputation, hadn't been erased by someone else's jealousy. That was the moment it hit me. I had been so focused on surviving that I forgot to fight. I forgot to take back what was mine. I had let Leah win. She had broken me, and I had allowed it. I had spent months hiding from the truth, thinking I could move on without confronting the source of my pain. But I couldn't run anymore. Not from Leah, not from my past. It was time to face her. It was time to stop letting her manipulate everyone around me, including myself. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. Not anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't going to let Leah keep taking from me. I was going to make her face the truth. I'd already tried to confront her before, but every time she twisted the situation. She made me look crazy, unstable. But this time was different. I was different. I had spent too long letting her control my narrative. Now it was my turn to take back the power. I spent the next few days doing what I should have done from the start, gathering evidence. I combed through old emails, messages, and social media posts. I talked to people who had known me before Leah started spreading her lies. Slowly, I began to build a case against her, a case that would expose everything she had done. I wasn't going to let her get away with it any longer. The plan wasn't just to confront Leah. It was to make sure everyone knew the truth. I wasn't going to let her manipulate my family, my friends, or anyone else anymore. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my life. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew it wouldn't be quick, but I was ready. I had nothing left to lose. The only thing I had left was my dignity, and I wasn't about to let Leah take that too. The more I dug into the truth, the angrier I became. The anger wasn't just about the lies she'd told, it was about the way she'd destroyed my entire life for no reason other than her own selfish need for attention. Leah didn't care about the damage she caused. She never had. She only cared about herself. And that was something I could no longer ignore. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized something else. Leah wasn't the only one at fault here. My father, Margaret, they had chosen to believe her over me. They had abandoned me without even giving me a chance to explain. And that betrayal ran deep. I had spent so long resenting Leah, but I had never stopped to really look at the people who had let her destroy me. The people who should have known me better. The people who should have been on my side. I wasn't ready to forgive them yet. Not after everything they'd done. But I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep holding on to this anger. I couldn't keep letting them control my life from a distance. So, I made another decision. It was time to let go. It was time to stop waiting for them to come to me. I had spent far too long hoping that one day they'd see the truth, that one day they'd apologize for abandoning me. But that day wasn't coming. It was up to me to heal, up to me to rebuild. But first, I had to deal with Leah. I called a lawyer. I started the process of gathering everything I needed to expose her. It wasn't going to be a quick fix, but I was determined. Leah had caused enough destruction in my life. It was time for her to face the consequences. The first step was getting my family to listen. I knew it wouldn't be easy. They were still convinced Leah was the victim. But I had evidence now. Evidence that would make it impossible for them to ignore the truth any longer. I wasn't going to let Leah's lies define me. And I wasn't going to let her destroy me anymore. I spent weeks preparing for the confrontation. I called people who had known me before Leah's lies started to spread. I gathered all the proof I needed. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about setting the record straight. It was about showing my family that they had been manipulated. And it was about giving myself the closure I needed to finally move on. When the day came to confront them, I was ready. Ready to stand up for myself. Ready to expose the truth. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Leah, or anyone else, control my life any longer. As I stood in front of my father and Margaret, I felt the weight of everything that had happened. All the lies, all the pain. But this time, I wasn't the victim. This time, I was the one with the truth on my side. And that truth was going to set me free. "Dad, Margaret," I said, my voice steady. "It's time you heard the whole story. It's time you knew what Leah did." They stared at me, but this time, I wasn't afraid. This time, I wasn't backing down. I had nothing left to lose. And I wasn't about to let Leah get away with it anymore. The day I finally decided to confront my family, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to either soar or fall. There was a cold, sharp clarity to the moment. I had been living in this fog of pain and anger for so long, but now I had the truth. The weight of it was heavy, but it also gave me strength. I wasn't the scared, broken person I used to be. I was someone who had fought and lost everything and yet still stood. I drove to my dad and Margaret's house with a strange sense of calm. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be like before when I was still hoping they'd come to their senses, when I was still wishing they'd take my side. Now, I had no expectations. I wasn't there for closure or for any emotional reconciliation. I was there to speak my truth. That was all. When I walked through the door, the tension in the air hit me instantly. It was the same as it had been that day, the day they turned their backs on me. Margaret was sitting at the kitchen table, eyes narrowing as soon as she saw me. She didn't even say hello. My dad was standing in the living room, arms crossed, staring at the floor as if he was preparing himself for a confrontation. Leah wasn't there, but I knew she was lurking somewhere in the shadows, like she always was, pulling the strings behind the scenes. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I kept my posture straight. I wasn't going to let them see how much they'd hurt me. I wasn't going to show them my weakness. "Dad, Margaret," I began, my voice calm but firm. "There's something you need to know." They exchanged a glance, and I could tell they were both bracing themselves. This wasn't going to be easy for any of us, but it was necessary. I pulled out the evidence I'd gathered over the past few weeks: messages, emails, social media posts. I had everything Leah had done to ruin my life laid out in front of them. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Neither of them moved. "Leah," I said, looking directly at my dad, "has been lying about me, and not just recently, for years now. She's spread rumors that I was on drugs, that I was involved in criminal activities, that I was some kind of untrustworthy, reckless person. But none of it is true." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The rage that had been simmering inside me for so long was starting to break free, but I kept it under control. This wasn't about getting angry. It was about making them see what I'd been through. "I know it's hard to believe," I continued, "but I've spent months piecing everything together. I've spoken to people who knew me before Leah started this campaign against me. I've gathered the truth, and I want you to hear it. For once, I need you to believe me." Margaret stood up abruptly, her face hardening as she spoke. "Emma, I'm not sure what you're trying to prove here. Leah has always been concerned about you. She's been trying to help you. But this doesn't feel right. I don't know where you're getting all this from." I could feel my heart sinking as I looked at her. She didn't get it. She didn't get any of it. She was still so deeply enmeshed in Leah's lies that the truth couldn't even penetrate. "Margaret, you've been blinded by Leah," I said, the words slipping out more forcefully than I meant. "She's been manipulating all of you. She's been making you think I was the problem. And you believed her over me. You threw me out of this house. You turned your backs on me when I needed you the most." My dad shifted on his feet, his expression unreadable. "Emma, we didn't know what to believe. You'd been acting different. And Leah, she's always been the one we've trusted." "Trusted?" I echoed bitterly. "You trusted her lies. You trusted the version of me she made up in her head. And because of that, I lost everything." There it was, the crux of it all. The truth they didn't want to face. They had been so willing to believe Leah's lies that they never stopped to question her version of events. They never stopped to ask me what had really happened. "I lost my job because of her," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I lost my friends, my reputation, and now I'm stuck trying to rebuild a life that you two completely destroyed." My dad opened his mouth as if to speak, but the words didn't come. I could see it, the hesitation, the guilt in his eyes. He was starting to see the cracks in the facade Leah had built, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. "She's your sister," Margaret said softly, as if that explained everything. "She's been through a lot, Emma. You don't know how hard this has been for her." I stared at her. Hard. "No, Margaret, you don't get it. Leah has been the one causing all of this. And she's been playing the victim the whole time. While I'm here, trying to pick up the pieces of my life, she's out there, lying, making sure you all keep believing that I'm the one who's crazy. And all of you've let her do it." There was silence in the room. My dad had sat down on the couch, his hands resting on his knees. Margaret was standing by the kitchen counter, staring at the floor. For the first time, I saw the cracks in their armor, the doubt creeping into their eyes. "I don't know what to say," my dad finally muttered, his voice barely audible. "You don't have to say anything," I replied, my voice steady. "Just listen. You've already chosen sides. You've already sided with Leah over me, and I can't change that. But I'm done trying to get you to see the truth. I'm done waiting for an apology that will never come." I stood up, my heart pounding, and I took a step toward the door. "I came here to show you what Leah has done. I came here to show you the truth, but now I'm done. You're either going to believe it or you're not. I can't keep living in the shadow of her lies anymore." As I opened the door, I could hear my dad call my name, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had said everything I needed to say. And now, the ball was in their court. I walked out of that house, feeling like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if anything would change. But I knew one thing for sure: I had taken control of my own story. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The next few days were a blur. I expected things to get worse, that Leah would make sure to escalate the drama once again. But for the first time, I didn't care. I wasn't going to be dragged back into her web. I was ready to move forward, even if it meant doing it alone. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated: my father reaching out. A few days after the confrontation, I received a text from him. It was short, almost cautious. "Emma, I've been thinking. I'm sorry. Let's talk." For the first time, my heart didn't leap at the thought of reconciliation. I didn't know if I was ready for that yet, but it was a start, a small step towards something I'd never thought would happen: healing. The text from my father lingered on my phone screen for what felt like an eternity. "Emma, I've been thinking. I'm sorry. Let's talk." The words weren't an apology. Not the kind I'd hoped for. Not the kind I had imagined in all the sleepless nights. They were a start, a crack in the wall that had been between us for so long. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to rebuild what had been destroyed. It would be so easy to walk away, to ignore it and move forward. But something about his message tugged at me. Maybe it was the fact that he was finally acknowledging the truth, however incomplete it was. Or maybe it was the fact that I had spent years desperately waiting for him to come back into my life, to apologize, to finally see me for who I was, not who Leah made me out to be. But now that he was offering, I didn't know if I was ready to accept. For days, I debated with myself. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell him it was too little, too late. I wanted to let the anger take over, to refuse to give him a chance to fix anything. He had chosen Leah. He had chosen her over me when I needed him the most. I didn't know how much I could forgive. But then, another part of me, the part that still remembered the father who used to cheer for me at soccer games, the one who held my hand when I had nightmares, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back. Maybe this was his way of saying he understood, of acknowledging how wrong he had been. The idea of opening that door again was terrifying, but it was also the only way to know if there was any chance for us to heal. I waited. The phone sat there, as still as my thoughts. I stared at it, my finger hovering over the keyboard. What would I even say? I thought. Could we really fix this? Could I forgive him for the years of pain, for the way he had abandoned me? Was I ready to put myself through the possibility of being let down again? Then, I realized something. I wasn't just asking if I could forgive him. I was asking if I could forgive myself for allowing myself to remain trapped in the past for so long. Could I let go of the resentment I held for him? Could I finally release the anger that had consumed me for years? The truth was, I wasn't sure. But I knew I couldn't stay where I was, stuck in the same old hurt. I had already let Leah take enough from me. I had spent so much time angry at my dad, angry at Margaret, angry at the world. It was time to choose peace, even if it meant facing the painful reality of what had happened. I needed to decide if I could move forward without bitterness, if I could stop letting the past control me. I texted him back, "I'm willing to talk, but only if you're ready to hear everything. I'm not going to sugarcoat it anymore." The reply came quickly, almost too quickly. "Thank you, Emma. I'm ready. I'm sorry. Let's meet." I didn't know what to expect when I walked into the coffee shop to meet him. The weight of the past hung between us, and I could feel it in my bones. Every part of me wanted to brace for an argument. a defense of his actions, an explanation for why he had believed Leah's lies over mine. But when I saw him, something in me softened. He was sitting at the corner table, looking older than I remembered, his face etched with the years of regret and frustration that had been building in the silence between us. I took a deep breath and walked over. He stood up when I approached, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to gauge if I was truly there or if this was just another one of his dreams. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "I know I've let you down. I can't change what happened, but I can try to make it right now. I owe you that much." I sat down across from him, feeling a rush of conflicting emotions. I didn't know what to say at first. The words felt stuck in my throat, like I was trying to force something that wasn't ready to come out. "You don't know what it's been like," I finally said, my voice cracking a little. "You don't know how it felt to be pushed out of my own family, to have to fight for the truth while you and Margaret sided with Leah. Every time I tried to talk to you, every time I begged for you to see the truth, you just didn't. And that hurt more than anything." He looked down at the table, his eyes filled with guilt. "I know. I see that now. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you." I nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling over me. But as much as it hurt, I realized something. This wasn't about me waiting for him to fix it all. It was about me taking responsibility for my own healing. I had spent too long waiting for an apology that might never come, and now I had to let go of that. I had to stop holding on to the pain. "You know, I thought I would hate you for what you did," I said quietly, "but I don't. Not anymore." He looked up, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What do you mean?" "I thought that holding on to my anger would make me feel better," I explained. "I thought it would make everything right. But all it did was keep me stuck. It kept me from moving on. I realized that I was letting Leah win by holding on to the past." He swallowed hard, and I saw his eyes start to well up. "I never wanted to hurt you, Emma. I never wanted to choose Leah over you. I didn't know what to believe." "I know," I said softly, "but it's too late for that now. We can't go back and fix what happened. All we can do is move forward." There was a long pause as he looked at me, and for the first time in years I saw a glimmer of the father I had lost. The man who had always cared, even if he hadn't always shown it. And maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to rebuild something. Not the same family we once had, but something new. Something built on honesty, something built on the truth. I leaned back in my chair and sighed, finally feeling the tension leave my body. I don't know what's going to happen between us, but I can't keep living in the past. I've spent enough time there already. He nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I understand. And I'll be here, no matter what. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm still your dad." I looked at him, a small part of me finally allowing myself to hope. "Let's take it one day at a time, okay? I'm not promising anything, but maybe we can start rebuilding from here." He smiled through his tears. "One day at a time." As I walked out of that coffee shop, something shifted inside me. It wasn't a complete fix, and I didn't expect it to be. But it was a start. I had let go of the anger that had held me hostage for so long. I had stopped waiting for an apology I would never get and started healing on my own terms. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own life. And for the first time, I knew that whatever came next, I would be okay. A few weeks had passed since my conversation with my dad. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. The world around me seemed less suffocating, less consumed by anger and regret. Things weren't perfect, not by a long shot, but for the first time, there was a crack in the wall that had been built between us. We hadn't spoken much since that day at the coffee shop, but we'd exchanged a few messages, small, cautious steps toward rebuilding a relationship that had been fractured for years. My dad had started making an effort to understand what had happened, to learn more about Leah's role in everything, and I could see the guilt in his eyes every time we spoke. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in the mess of everything that had happened, that was enough for now. What surprised me the most, though, was how much I had changed. I didn't realize just how much anger I had been carrying around until it started to slip away. For so long, I thought holding on to that anger was my only way of protecting myself. I thought it was my shield. But now, I realized that it had been nothing but a weight. A burden that I had been dragging behind me, slowing me down, keeping me from moving forward. It wasn't easy to let go. The anger didn't vanish overnight. There were still moments when I'd find myself thinking about Leah, about all the lies she'd told, about the way she'd manipulated everyone I loved. There were still moments when I wanted to scream, to tell her exactly how much she'd hurt me. But I also realized something else. The more I focused on her, the more power I gave her. And I wasn't going to do that anymore. I was done being her victim. One afternoon, I found myself walking down the street toward a little bookstore I'd passed a few times. I'd always loved the smell of old books, the way the pages felt between my fingers. It was a small comfort, a quiet moment of peace in the middle of the chaos that had been my life. I hadn't been to a bookstore in months, years even. The world had felt too heavy to escape into a novel. But today, something had shifted, and I needed to feel like myself again. As I stepped inside, the smell of paper and ink wrapped around me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. I browsed the shelves, pulling out books I used to love, running my fingers along the spines. I was looking for something to help me understand what came next. I had rebuilt so much, but there were still pieces of me I needed to reclaim. That was when I saw it. It was a small journal tucked away on a dusty shelf, the leather cover worn from years of use. I wasn't sure what had drawn me to it. Maybe it was the way the sunlight filtered through the window, casting a warm glow over the cover. Maybe it was the feeling of needing to capture everything, every moment of this new life I was trying to create. Whatever it was, I knew I had to have it. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it in my hands. There was something about it that felt right. It wasn't just about the journal, it was about taking control of my story. It was about finally documenting the truth, about writing my own narrative without the lies of others dictating it. I didn't write in it immediately, but I carried it with me everywhere. It was a symbol of my new beginning, a reminder that I had the power to write my own future. The road to healing wasn't linear. There were still days when I doubted myself, when the memories of what Leah had done would creep back in. But those days were becoming fewer and farther between. I was learning to find peace in the present, to embrace the life I had now rather than dwell on the life I had lost. I had moments of clarity, moments where I could look at my past with a sense of understanding instead of bitterness. I wasn't saying everything was forgiven, I wasn't there yet, but I was learning to let go of the need for vengeance, for validation. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. I had built something stronger within myself. And then, the unexpected happened. One evening, a message popped up on my phone. It was from an old friend, someone I hadn't heard from in years. Her name was Rachel, and we had been close during the time before everything went sideways with Leah. She was someone I had lost touch with, someone who had distanced herself from me after the rumors started to spread. But now, here she was, reaching out. "Emma," the message read, "I've been thinking about you lately. I heard about everything with Leah, and I just wanted to apologize. I should have been there for you. I'm so sorry for letting the rumors get to me." I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure of what to feel. The apology felt genuine, but it also stirred up old wounds. This wasn't the first time someone had come to me apologizing for not standing by me, for believing the lies. But this time I felt different. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I simply felt tired. I typed out a response. "Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate you reaching out. I know things got complicated back then, but I've moved on. I'm doing okay now. I hope you are too." The message was simple. It wasn't about reopening old wounds or trying to force a reconnection. It was about closure. It was about acknowledging that the past was the past, and that we had both moved on. I didn't need to hold on to that chapter of my life anymore. I had turned the page. As I put the phone down, I realized something. Every step I had taken had been towards healing, towards reclaiming my life. It wasn't about erasing the pain it would always be a part of me, but it was about choosing how I responded to that pain. It was about choosing to rise above it. I could still feel the scars Leah had left on me, but I wasn't defined by them anymore. I wasn't the girl who had lost everything. I was the woman who had rebuilt herself, piece by piece. I was the woman who had walked away from the people who had hurt her and chosen to live for herself. I was the woman who had learned to let go of the past and embrace the future. I took a deep breath and looked around. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I had survived, I had overcome, and I was finally free. The journal I'd bought sat beside me, waiting for me to fill its pages. I wasn't sure what I'd write next, but I knew this. Whatever it was, it would be my story, no one else's. And that was the greatest freedom of all. As I left the bookstore and walked into the sunset, I realized that the hardest part was over. I had faced my demons, and I had chosen to let them go. Now, all that was left was to live, to love, to create a life that was mine. No more lies, no more fear, just me. And that was enough story too. After my parents moved in, my elder brother requested the master bedroom when he also moved in. Additionally, personal space occupies half of the dwelling. I ejected them all. At the age of 26, he lives with my parents in a home that I fully pay for. Although it seems rather simple, it's far more intricate than that. I'll begin from the beginning. Last year, I purchased a home in the city. I pay for groceries, all of the bills, the full mortgage, and everything else. Tom is 50, and my parents are 52 at 5 in the morning. Neither of the retiring teachers pays a cent. I also couldn't pay the rent, so it wasn't a relocation back home. As a software developer, I actually earn a nice living, and I wanted to be nearer to employment options in the city. In addition, I felt that after they had supported me for years, it would be good to return the favor. The property has 3 good bedrooms, a large living room, and a garden. Make this home comfortable without being ostentatious. I'm entitled to the main bedroom because I pay for everything. It has its own bathroom and a walk-in wardrobe, which is great because I detest having to share a bathroom. I work from home in the second bedroom. I set it up with 2 monitors, a comfortable chair, and everything I need because I spend roughly 80% of my time working from home. For family visits, the third bedroom was kept as a guest room. Everything was fantastic at first. While I worked and took care of the house, my parents, who were glad to be in the city, went about their own business. Since they were my parents, and I felt good about supporting them after everything they had done for me, I didn't mind paying the bills. Then, however, a shift occurred. My mother casually dropped a bombshell at breakfast one morning. She said my 28-year-old brother Jake and his 26-year-old wife Emma were considering relocating to the city. They have reportedly been having difficulties, and Emma is pregnant. They really need the help, she added. At first, I didn't give it much thought. I thought that if Jake and Emma relocated, they would find a tiny flat close by, but they have a history of jumping from one horrible circumstance to another. Things took a turn for which I was unprepared at that point. Several days later, my mother sat me down and, in her most naive manner, informed me that Jake and Emma had been asked to remain with us, although temporarily, until they recovered. They didn't ask if I was comfortable with this, though. Oh no. After inviting them, they informed me. Jake and Emma arrived with their luggage in hand, obviously intending to remain for the duration, while I was still absorbing the entire situation. This is the offer. As soon as Jake and Emma moved in, it was obvious they had no intention of leaving. I'm already anxious about the additional costs I'll have to pay. Everything is being paid for by me. Everything from groceries to electricity to the mortgage. And now that no one is asking how I feel, I have 2 more individuals to help. Even though I like my brother, Jake isn't the most responsible guy. Every time he finds himself in a sticky circumstance, someone else ends up saving him. Although Emma is kind enough, I don't like her entitled attitude. For example, since she is expecting, the world ought to accommodate her. Almost instantly, the tension began to rise. A few days following their move-in date, Emma began to say these small things. You know, the ones that look innocuous but are really very bothersome. It must be difficult for you to clean everything by yourself because this home is so large. Otherwise, when the baby gear arrives, we'll need a lot more room. At first, I didn't give it much thought, but one evening, things became more serious. Emma and Jake drew me away and said they needed a conversation. Perhaps they would offer an apology for the additional strain they were placing on me, I reasoned. Or even give cash assistance. No, Emma, all casual says. We have been considering taking the master bedroom since we believe it would make more sense. I blinked, supposing I had misheard, but Jake interrupted. Yes, a lot of things will be needed for the infant. Additionally, your room features a private bathroom and walk-in wardrobe. I pay the mortgage, in case you forgot. Everything is paid for by me. And while I was sitting here, These two suggested that I give them my own room, as well as their unborn kid. I was suddenly struck by the boldness. I remained composed and suggested that you simply use the guest room. It's quite large. Emma looked at me as if I had just made a ridiculous suggestion. There isn't a walk-in wardrobe in the room. The infant will require space, she remarked. I was finished. I refused to give up my room. You can either find another place to stay or use the guest room. Jake appeared somewhat taken aback, as if he was surprised that Emma was actually caving in instead of me. She was really insulted. I realized then that this was not going to work out. Things quickly started to go south. I observed Jake and Emma becoming quite at ease over the course of the following few days. Their belongings were all over the place. The couch kicked her away. The dining table was covered in baby magazines. Emma even began discussing the crib's location as if she had already made up her mind that they would remain in the master bedroom. I had to attend a meeting in the office one day. My blood ran cold as soon as I got home. Everything the first owned, including my clothes, computer monitor, and personal belongings, was in the hallway. Emma was packing up the last of my belongings in the master bedroom as if it were no big deal when I burst in. "Why on earth are you doing this?" I spoke without thinking. She didn't flinch at all. "We may move in here, according to your mother. We need the room because the baby will be here shortly." I was furious. "You're not taking my room, I told you." Emma folded her arms. "It's too tiny in the guest room. I refuse to accept it. I don't care. My room is not yours. You can stay in the guest room or find somewhere else to live." At this point, Emma was upset, but I didn't care. I stormed out of the room, grabbed my phone, and called my mom, who wasn't even home at the time. "Mom, did you tell Jake and Emma they could move into my room?" There was a long pause. Finally, she admitted, "Well, I thought it would be the best solution. They need the space. And you've already got the office. It's not like you're using the master bedroom for much." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious? I pay the mortgage. I pay the bills. And you believe it's all right for them to take over my room?" She attempted to calm me down, claiming it wasn't a huge issue, but I was done listening. "I'm not giving them my room. If they don't get their stuff out, they're going to need to find another somewhere to stay." Emma must have overheard me because she walked out looking furious. "Are you really planning to abandon us while we are expecting a child?" Hearing the ruckus, Jake, who had been outside, entered. "What's happening?" I explained it to him. "Your wife is attempting to seize my room, but I'm telling you both, that's not going to happen. Either leave or remain in the guest room." Jake was not pleased. He attempted to play the whole family card, but I refused to back down. I threatened to do it for them if they didn't get their belongings out of my room by the end of the day. Emma walked off, slamming the door as Jake scowled at me. After that explosion, I knew this was far from finished, so I withdrew to my office. Emma and Jake could eventually back off, I thought. I was quite clear. No one was interested in my room. They might depart or remain in the guest room. Apparently easy enough. Naturally, however, things did not go as planned. The home seemed strangely silent in the morning. Too silent. I spent the most of the day in my office since I didn't want to deal with any more turmoil. Things worsened when I went outside to get something to eat, when it was time for supper. When I opened the refrigerator, I saw it was nearly empty. The majority of the food I had just purchased 2 days prior were already gone. The freezer was also somewhat empty. It was definitely not me, and I knew my parents didn't eat that way. Jake and Emma have to be involved. Without even asking, they would help themselves to everything. I tried to ignore the fact that I was already annoyed. I assumed that tomorrow I would simply go food shopping once more. It wasn't simply the food, though. My mother entered the kitchen without making eye contact with me as I sat down at the table. In private, she prepared meals for Emma, Jake, my dad, and herself. She didn't make me one, though. I initially believed she could have forgotten. Then she was done serving. Everyone took a seat and began to eat. I was left sitting there looking foolishly at them. I tried to remain calm as I glanced at my mother. "You failed to prepare a platter for me?" I inquired. She hardly looked up. "You're unwilling to assist the family. You don't join the family for meals." She spoke as nonchalantly as though discussing the weather. What I was hearing was unbelievable. "Please pardon me. You're freezing me out even though I pay for everything here. including the food and the mortgage. My father remained silent, simply sighed and continued eating as if it didn't matter, sitting there looking smug, as if they had won some sort of power struggle, were Jake and Emma. Emma even gave me a grin as I passed by. It was really passive-aggressive. I nearly broke down there. I hurried out of the kitchen after slamming the refrigerator door. It was more than I could handle. In my own home, I wasn't going to be treated like an alien. I paid for the house. I immediately walked to my room, picked up my laptop, and began researching the process of serving eviction notices. It was enough. I got the documentation ready in an hour. I printed 2 sets, one for my parents and one for Jake and Emma. My own family had gone too far, yet it seemed strange to expel them. I wasn't going to continue allowing them to treat me disrespectfully. I returned to the living room where everyone was seated once the notifications were printed. I said nothing at all. In front of my parents, I just slapped the papers down and gave Jake and Emma the second set. Jake seemed perplexed. "What is this?" Scanning the papers, he questioned. "You have 24 hours to gather your belongings and depart," I said, trying to seem as composed as possible. "I'll contact the cops if you don't leave by tomorrow." Jake's face became white. Obviously, he hadn't anticipated this. "You're not serious," he whispered. "Oh," I said, "I'm dead serious. I finished this. You've been taking advantage of me here without doing anything, and now you want to take over my home? No, no more." Jake got up and glared at me as if he were prepared for a brawl, but I remained where I was. I was larger, taller, and most definitely not scared by his small outburst. "We're family," he muttered, gritting his teeth. "You cannot simply dismiss us." "I can indeed," I remarked, taking a step forward. "This residence is paid for by me. Not Emma, not you, not your parents. You won't be allowed to live here if you can't show me respect." Naturally, Emma began to scream and play the victim. "You're throwing us out when I'm pregnant. What sort of brother do you have? While you two exploit me, I'm the brother who has been footing the bill," I fired back. "You have a whole day. It's more than giving." Although Jake seemed eager to continue the argument, I could see the realization setting in. I wasn't playing a bluff. After sitting silently the entire time, my mother eventually said something. "This is not possible. They are your brother and sister-in-law, honey. It's family." I was no longer concerned. "I've completed it already." Pointing to the eviction notice she was holding, I said, "If you're not gone by then, you have 30 days to locate another place to go. I am going to file a lawsuit." The room fell quiet. My father remained silent. He appeared utterly confused as he simply gazed at the table. My mother was on the verge of tears, but I refused to back down. Being kind was no longer the point of this. This was about defending myself and refusing to let them take advantage of me. After a few uncomfortable minutes, I turned and left them to take it all in before heading back to my room. After locking the door, I sat down at my desk and inhaled deeply. I had just kicked out my own family, something I never imagined having to do. But what do you know? It was pleasant. It felt natural. I was not going to be used any longer. For the remainder of the night, the home was strangely silent. Nobody tried to quarrel with me or knock on my door. They must have realized at last that I was no longer playing around. If I wasn't respected by them, they had no right to reside in my home. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Update 1. I anticipated either a flurry of controversy or everyone finally taking me seriously when I handed out the eviction notices. Rather, the home became silent, inconveniently silent. Due in part to my inability to fall asleep, I woke up earlier than usual the next morning. I was waiting for a certain event. Perhaps my parents would attempt to persuade me, or Jake could knock on my door and insist that I alter my decision. However, none of that took place. The home was deserted when I woke up and entered the kitchen. No Emma, Jake, no parents. I even worried whether they departed in the middle of the night after packing things. I suppose it's wishful thinking. I waited for someone to speak while I sat at the table making my coffee. Anything. I had no desire to engage in small conversation or repeat my explanation. I wasn't going to back down now that I had drawn my line. I couldn't continue living that way since they had pushed me too far. They showed me no respect, and they certainly showed no regard for the fact that I was footing the bill. My mother eventually entered the kitchen. She appeared to have had little sleep. At first, she remained silent, just sat across from me and got a cup of coffee. It was strange that neither of us knew how to respond to the awkward quiet. The stillness was finally broken by her. "Honey," she replied in a kind, weary tone, "I am aware that things have gone out of control." I remained silent, waited for her to continue, as I just gazed at my coffee. Even though I knew she would have to apologize in some way, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. "I was unaware of the severity of the situation between you and your brother." Her voice cracked slightly as she went on. "I suppose I didn't see how unfair it was to you because we were only attempting to assist them. I was surprised by it. I didn't think she would confess. Not so quickly. I briefly believed that perhaps she was finally understanding that in this case, I wasn't the bad guy. However, I was still unable to get over my irritation with all that had transpired. "You didn't just disregard my request," I said. I spoke more sharply than I meant to. "Each and every time you took their side, as if you just thought I would lay over and give them anything they desired." She stared down at her coffee for a few seconds before speaking. "I understand," she murmured softly, "but we reasoned that you've always been the one with strength, Jake." It has never been simple for him. She always used that as an excuse. Jake lacks strength. Jake had had more difficulty. Jake need further assistance. Since I was the one with my life together, it seemed as though they didn't believe I had boundaries. "You also believe that I've had it easy?" With my rage seething just below the surface, I asked. "This house was purchased by me. The mortgage is paid by me. The groceries are paid for by me. All of you have been carried by me. And you believe I can simply do it indefinitely?" She nodded and groaned. "You're correct. We couldn't have asked for much more than you have." But I interrupted her since Jake was expecting a kid. "The infant isn't the point here. Respect is at issue here. And I haven't seen any from you folks." She looked tired as she sighed once again. "We believed we were doing appropriately." At last, she spoke. "Emma and Jake. They have very little. And who is to blame for that?" I fired back. "I didn't invite them to live with me. None of this was requested of me. Their lives must be figured out on their own. Furthermore, you cannot continue to save them by ignoring me." She gave a nod, seemed to comprehend at last, or at least making an effort. With a lower voice now, she replied, "We'll figure something out. But don't push us away, please. Not in this manner." I tried to relax and sat back. I did not wish to expel them. They were my parents. However, I couldn't continue to live this way. They would have to go or things would have to alter. "I don't wish to eject you." I spoke as calmly as possible. "However, things must change. I can't continue to live this way, being treated in my own home as like I'm unimportant." She didn't dispute, just gave a silent nod. "All right," she said. "After that, we'll work something out." After she left the kitchen, I found myself thinking alone once more. At least it appeared like they were beginning to take me seriously, even if I wasn't sure if anything would actually change. Later in the afternoon, when Jake eventually arrived, he appeared to have been holding his rage within all day. He entered the living room without saying hello or anything, with the same angry look he had had ever since I delivered him the eviction notice. He simply sat down across from me. I remained silent as well. I simply continued to stare at my phone. "Thus, it will be like this." At last, he spat, his voice dripping with resentment. "Will you actually throw us out?" I hardly raised my gaze. "I offered you a day. I'm going to contact the cops if you're still here tomorrow." Jake snorted and shook his head as if I were the villain. "We are related. This is not how you treat your family." I reclined back in my chair and placed my phone down. Yes, family members also don't take advantage of one another. For weeks, you have been doing nothing but freeloading. Do you now believe that you can just occupy my home? Jake, I'm not your backup plan. After that, he had nothing else to say. He sat for a minute, obviously wanting to fight, but he had run out of things to say. He realized I wasn't kidding when I outlined my demands. Jake stood up, muttered to himself, and stomped off again after a few more uncomfortable seconds of stillness. Jake, typical. When things didn't go his way, he was always running. Quietly, almost too quietly. The remainder of the day went by. Even though I had no idea what Jake and Emma would do, I wasn't going to change my mind. They had more than enough time to work things out, yet all they had done was snoop me. Everything would be decided in the following 24 hours. An update on the morning of their due date for eviction. Once more, I got up early. I was aware that this was the day. That was the day Jake and Emma either departed or had me file a lawsuit. Oddly enough, I no longer felt furious. I didn't even feel nervous. The only thing left to do was to follow through on what I had already recognized had to happen. The home was still eerily silent when I woke up and walked into the kitchen. Almost like the quiet before a storm, it felt different. Even though the refrigerator still looked very empty after Jake and Emma's most recent grocery run, I prepared myself some breakfast. I was able to scrape together enough money for a good supper, and as I ate, I couldn't help but reflect on how quickly things had gotten out of hand. It was all right, only a few months ago. I was doing well with my parents. Life was wonderful, I was working, and I was paying my expenses. Then things went haywire when Jake and Emma arrived. When individuals begin to feel entitled to things they didn't earn, it's amazing how fast things can shift. I heard footsteps in the corridor a few hours later. After entering the kitchen and getting a cup of coffee, my dad took a seat at the table across from me. At first, he remained silent, just drank his coffee while gazing out the window. I couldn't tell if he was upset with me or simply unsure of what to say. The stillness was finally broken by him. "Emma and Jake are heading out today." "Silently," he said. I took a while to reply. Although I felt awful about it, I knew that this was the proper thing to do. I could no longer allow them to exploit me. And so be it if that meant they had to go. There is nowhere for them to go. In a quiet voice, my father added, "Until they work things out, they will be staying in a hotel for some time." I glanced at him and paused in the middle of my mouthful. I did have some remorse, but I pushed it aside right immediately. I had allowed them time. They had plenty of time to straighten up, and they hadn't taken any action to assist themselves. I offered them an opportunity. I said, maintaining a steady tone. They gave me no option. My father did not quarrel. I assumed he would try to guilt trip me, but he didn't. He simply took another drink of his coffee and nodded. I believe he finally realized that. This time, I wasn't going to back down. We couldn't return to the way things were after everything that had transpired. Jake and Emma began packing their belongings around lunchtime. I spent the majority of it in my room because I didn't want to argue with anybody else or hear more passive-aggressive remarks. Eventually, though, I heard Jake's voice growing louder from the other end of the corridor, so I sensed that something was going to happen. Jake did really knock on my door. He was standing there with the same angry expression he had had from the beginning of this whole situation. When I opened it, "Are you truly going to allow this to occur?" His voice was stern as he inquired, "Are you just going to dismiss us in this manner?" I leaned against the doorframe with my arms folded. "I offered you a day. You are aware of what must occur." Jake clenched his jaw, obviously attempting to control his rage. "We are family men. This is not how you treat your family." I inhaled deeply while attempting to maintain my composure. "Family members don't exploit one another. I won't throw you out without cause. For weeks, you have been wasting your time here without making any contributions. I've been covering everything, including the groceries and the mortgage. And rather than expressing gratitude, you attempted to evict me from my home and seize my room. I will not allow it to occur." For a few seconds, Jake remained silent. He was obviously furious, but he had nothing else to dispute about. Even though he didn't want to acknowledge it, he knew I was correct. "That's it," he mumbled at last, his voice low. "Are you simply dismissing us?" "I'm offering you the same choice that I did yesterday," I answered. "You have two options. Either go someplace else or respect my personal space by remaining in the guest room. But then, if you are unable to accomplish that, yes, you're heading out?" Jake gave me one last look, then turned and left without saying anything else. I took a deep breath and shut the door. Even though I knew I had to finish by mid-afternoon, the entire scenario had been draining. Emma and Jake had left. To be honest, I didn't want to watch them go, so I didn't. A dramatic farewell was unnecessary. Without a word to me, they packed up their belongings, put them in their car, and drove away. After they were gone, the home felt different. Less noisy, less tense. For the remainder of the day, I didn't hear anything from my parents. They were probably still assimilating all that had transpired. Despite the fact that she appeared distressed, my mother remained silent. Perhaps she finally saw that I wasn't the source of this whole situation. This was the outcome of Jake and Emma pushing me too far. My mother knocked on my door that night. She entered, took a seat on my bed's edge, and gazed at the floor for a long time. She was clearly struggling to find the proper words. "They have vanished." Softly, she said. Without a word, I nodded. She said, "I never thought it would get to this point. I had no idea how much strain we were placing on you." I felt some of the frustration subside as I gazed at her, not because I didn't want to assist, I remarked, attempting to defend my position. "However, you folks acted as like I didn't exist, like it didn't matter that I needed my space." She nodded and groaned. "You're correct, we ought to have seen it sooner." For several minutes, neither of us really knew what to say next, so we sat in quiet. Although I could tell she was unhappy, at least she now appeared to get my point. "I don't want you to go with Dad." After a time, I said, shattering the quiet. "However, if nothing changes, this is not how I can live." She stood up slowly and nodded once more. "We'll work it out," she said. "I promise that things will be different." I had an odd mixture of relief and fatigue as she walked out of the room. There was still work to be done with my parents, but the matter with Jake and Emma was finally resolved. Even though I knew it wouldn't be simple, at least they were open to listening now. I felt as though I could breathe for the first time in weeks. The strain that had been choking me was gone, and the house was silent. Although it wasn't a perfect solution, I was at least able to regain my personal space. Above everything else, I was respected. There was a spooky silence when Jake and Emma left the house. Although I felt as though I could breathe at last, the incident continued to nag in the back of my mind. Even though I had won the fight for my room and my respect, I still questioned whether or not my relationship with my parents would ever truly return to normal. There was no turning back after I had drawn a firm line. Nevertheless, I'm hoping we can figure out a way to proceed without all of the conflict. It was peaceful, perhaps too quiet, in the days that followed. My parents were largely private. Occasionally, my mother would say something courteous, but we never discussed the incident. My dad, who has always been the more reticent one, seems to completely avoid any confrontational situations. I wasn't sure if they were still digesting all that had happened, or if this was their way of giving me space. In any case, the stillness was fine with me. To avoid thinking about anything, I threw myself into my work at my home office for the majority of the day. My haven was the office. This was my way of getting away from all the turmoil that had been going on over the preceding several weeks. However, I would occasionally catch myself reflecting on how things had transpired. It had all erupted, and I couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for it. However, I also knew that I had made the correct decision. Something had to give, because I had been taken advantage of for far too long. A week or so following Jake and Emma's departure, my mother entered my office as I was working. She seemed to be thinking about something, judging by the way she hovered at the entrance. "Have you got a moment?" Her voice was strangely gentle as she inquired. I turned to her and nodded, saving my work. "What is going on?" She nervously wrung her hands as she entered the room. "Everything pertaining to Jake, Emma, and our treatment of you has been on my mind." I remained silent so she could talk. She seemed to have something she wanted to talk about. Her voice cracked slightly as she added, "I just wanted to say that we didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter. I now realize that we were placing too much pressure on you, even if we believed we were helping Jake. We took advantage of the fact that you have done more for us than we could have ever dreamed for. I apologize." I was taken by surprise by the apology. Although I had anticipated some sort of recognition soon, it was more painful for me to hear her express it so bluntly. Her honesty was evident in her eyes, and she seemed to genuinely understand how I had been feeling for the first time in a long time. I tried to sound solid as I said, "Thank you, Mom." However, the property and the money weren't the only factors. Respect was at issue. I had the impression that none of you respected me or the work I was doing to keep things going. Although I didn't mind assisting, I couldn't continue to live like way. She wiped a tear from the corner of her eye and nodded. "You're correct. We ought to have honored your personal space. It won't occur once again. Long, emotional chats weren't my thing, but this one seemed important. It seemed as though a burden had been removed, and I could now see a way forward free from ongoing conflict and animosity. I got a little regretful grin from my mom, and she went back to the kitchen. For some minutes, I sat there, taking in the talk. Although it wasn't a complete answer, it was a positive move. A few weeks later was the actual turning moment. By that time, a new routine had been established in the house. The unpleasant atmosphere that had pervaded every room since Jake and Emma's departure had gradually subsided, and my parents were more considerate of my personal space. After living in a battle zone for the past few months, I could finally feel the house turning back into a home. My dad was seated at the kitchen table one evening, looking especially serious. When I got home after an office meeting, my dad wasn't usually into long conversations. He let my mother to handle the majority of it, but I could tell he had something significant to say by the way he was sitting and looking into his coffee cup. "Hey," I said, attempting to be informal as I went to the refrigerator for a drink. "Is everything all right?" His countenance was contemplative as he looked up. "I've wanted to speak with you." Curious but not very concerned, I took a seat across from him. "What is it about?" He inhaled deeply. His hands interlocked in front of him. He leaned forward. "Regarding the house and all of your efforts to maintain this location," I said nothing. Recognizing that he had to let things out, I realized I haven't said much. "But I've been thinking about it a lot," he said in a quiet voice. "None of us could have predicted the amount of work you have done for this family. I also want you to know how much I value it." I was surprised. It was important to hear my dad express those words since he wasn't the kind to open up like this. He went on, "You didn't ask for any of this. Additionally, you have carried more than your part. I apologize for how Jake and Emma's relationship ended, and I just wanted to let you know that I see it. It struck me differently when he acknowledged what I had gone through than when my mother apologized, because I could see he had been holding on to this for some time. Although none meant more than the other, my dad's reserved demeanor somehow gave his remarks a deeper meaning. I said, "Thanks, Dad. I'm at a loss for words. That is really significant." He took another drink of his coffee and nodded. "All I want is for things to improve for everyone." Although the chat was brief, it was sufficient. He seemed sincere, and I had the impression that things were at last beginning to improve at that very time. Within the next weeks, things kept getting better. I no longer felt like I was alone in the house, and my parents and I were able to establish a new routine. They began to assist more, cleaning, assisting with groceries, and generally showing me respect for my personal space. Although it wasn't flawless, it was a significant step up from our previous situation. What about Emma and Jake? Well, when they went, I didn't hear anything from them. According to my mom, they were looking for a place of their own and were spending some time at a motel. I refrained from prying. Even though I adored my brother, I needed him to learn how to be independent, so I had set clear limits. I'd be happy to stay away for a while if that meant it. About a month after the entire incident, Jake texted me one afternoon. It was succinct and direct. It wasn't his typical approach, but it felt genuine. "Hey, I understand that things went wrong. I simply wanted to apologize for the way things turned out. I hope we can speak soon as we work things out." I looked at the message for a long time, unsure of how to react. A part of me was grateful for the gesture, but another part of me was still upset about how everything had turned out. I took a while to respond. It took me longer to process. I took some time that evening to write a response, attempting to be polite yet explicit about my position. "I appreciate the message. I'm happy that you two are working things out. I need some time, but I hope we can communicate soon as well. When we're both ready, let's catch up." A weird sensation of closure came over me as I pushed submit. I didn't expect things to be perfect, and they weren't. But at least there was communication once more. A few weeks ago, that was more than I could have imagined. I started to feel more at ease with things as time passed. My parents were finally accepting my boundaries, and there was no longer any tension in the house. Above all, I regained my sense of control over my life and my personal space. The journey here was not simple. It had been one of the most difficult things I had ever had to do to defend myself, especially against relatives. However, it was ultimately worthwhile. I had gained important knowledge. It is impossible to expect respect. Even inside your own family, you have to earn it. I had earned mine too. In retrospect, I'm happy I didn't give up. It would have been simple to give in and let Jake and Emma take over my room. to allow my parents continue to manage the house as if I were a visitor. I didn't want that life, though. I desired my own privacy and self-respect, and now I had it at last. One day, perhaps. Jake and Emma's relationship will be different. We could be near once more, like we were before all of this turmoil. I'm simply focused on living my life as I need to for the time being, though, and it seems like enough for the first time in a long time.